Good evening, everyone. I would ask that you would all please rise as our good friend Pastor Doug Dent of the Federated Church leads us in an invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Heavenly God, we come to you today asking for your guidance, your wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. We gather to make decisions for our community. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter placed before us, and always to act in accordance with what's best for our community and our fellow citizens. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion. Allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. Continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth, for your greater glory, and in the service of one another. All these things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's 5:30, March 18th, 2019, and we'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council to order. Roll call, please.
Hagberg.
Here.
Kwame.
Here.
Rupert.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Arneson.
Here.
Jefferson is absent. Hicks.
Here.
And Fish is absent.
We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the agenda, and I will call on our City Administrator, Andrew Bremseth, if there are any additions or corrections.
Yeah, good evening, Your Honor, members. Nothing to change on the agenda this evening.
Enough of that motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'll second, Your
Is there a
Honor.
second? Thank you, Justin. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Under public hearings this evening, we have a public hearing for the Citizen Participation Plan for Small Cities Development Program application. And I will call on Michael Olson of the HRA to give his comments, and then we will open up the public hearing.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for having me. In the spring of 2018, the HRA was in front of council asking permission to write a grant for a small cities development program through Minnesota Deed for a neighborhood in Fergus Falls. The boundaries that were established as the neighborhood that we would survey are Vernon to Channing and Oak to Arlington. Approximately 400 residents or homes are in this neighborhood, and we spent a considerable amount of time over these past several months surveying for interest for participation should the city receive this grant. The application that we've submitted to Minnesota Deed is for the rehabilitation of 20 owner-occupied homes with a grant per home from Minnesota Deed of $25,000 per project. These funds would be provided to homeowners that qualify by income and would be forgiven at a rate of 10% per year for 10 years. If someone would receive this money and improve their home, the only thing that would trigger repayment of this is sale of the home or transfer of title. If the owner would stay for the full 10-year term, it's completely forgiven. There's two target areas set up within this neighborhood. There's a target area A that would be covered for the first 12 months of the grant, and a target area B that would be opened up for the second half of the grant. Target area A is Oak to Mill. Target area B is Mill to Arlington. The total cost of the project right now, the application reads that we're asking for $25,000 per project with a maximum of 20 projects funded. The HRA and the city have each put in some leverage dollars totaling $80,000. Rural Development has been contacted, and they are projecting up to $50,000 available for eligible households within this neighborhood. Administrative costs for the project are covered by Minnesota Deed through the Small Cities Development Program. Up to 15% of the total project cost can be covered in administrative fees. And in-kind donations have already been put into the application process of $5,000 from the City of Fergus Falls and $8,000 through the HRA. Our most recent grant in Fergus Falls was from the years 2015 through 2017. During that grant, we received more than $500,000 for that neighborhood. That neighborhood was Stanton to 7th and Buse to Vine. The implementation schedule, if we're awarded, usually grant awards come out in June. There's some environmental work we have to do on the neighborhood. We would hope to have that complete by August. First round of applications would go out in early August, with home inspections beginning as early as August 15th. It's a 30-month grant, so we would have until September 30th of 2021 to complete. Any home built before 1974 were required to submit a review to the State Historic Preservation Office. So any applicants wanting to participate that have homes older than 45 years, the first thing we would do is take a picture of the property. We attach it to a document that talks about what the scope of work would include. We send that down to the State Historic Preservation Office. They provide us with a review. If it is a historic property and the homeowner is willing to participate, we would do what we can within those restraints to complete the rehab.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any questions from the council? So this is just, required notice has been given, and now a public hearing is required in order, as part of the process, as part of the application process. Is that
The hopes are that with a public hearing that any residents of that neighborhood or other residents of the community that have questions or concerns about the activity would have an opportunity to ask, how the funds are being used, where they're being used, if they qualify, etc.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael. With that, I will open the public hearing, and anyone from the public is welcome to step forward with any questions, comments for the council. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and it's back to the council. I don't know, I believe the public hearing is all that's required this evening. We don't need any further action by the council unless the council has any questions for Michael or for staff.
I think it's a good opportunity to bring some money in and help people. I mean, 10% forgiveness over 10 years is a pretty good blown program.
I'll just say thank you to Michael. I know there's, in this day and age, it's not easy to get the required responses to the surveys. The people are getting bombarded with things every day, and you've been out there knocking on doors, and so anyway, I thank you and the HRA for the work that you've done, because this is an important project that can really help a neighborhood and put a lot of value into a neighborhood. So, Scott?
Just a question for how the application process goes for someone who might be interested in doing this. I've seen all different kinds of applications for money over the course of time, and some are real simple single page, nothing to it deals, and others are many, many, many pages with all kinds of tax returns and this and that. For someone in the public who might be interested in this, how might you explain to them this process? Is it simple, complex? What do you think?
I would say it's quite simple. The requirements, of course, for starters, right now we've developed a waiting list based on those people who have responded to our surveying efforts. Any surveys that come into our office are date stamped for when they're received, and we build the waiting list based on when those surveys come in. The application process itself is there's probably 6 or 8 total pages, of which 3 or 4 are mostly explaining the process. The first few pages are, name, address. The requirements are that you're current on your mortgage, that you have a homeowner's insurance policy. We ask for a couple of years of tax information, proof of income, pay stubs or tax papers. Typically speaking, those people who might be overwhelmed by the application process, we make appointments with staff at our office, and within an hour's time, if they receive our checklist, bring the documents with them, and sit down in the office at the HRA, within an hour's time, we've got it filled out, and we know if we're approved or denied. So, pretty simple.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for Michael? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no awards, bids, to award this evening, and there are no petitions and communications. Item G on the agenda is the consent agenda. There's a copy in your packet. There's also, Lynn has put a copy on the board for anyone. If there's any items on that, in that consent agenda that anyone would like to discuss individually, we can remove them. If not, I would entertain a resolution approving the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Krista. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ginsburg.
Yes.
Kwame.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Arneson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Under ordinance and resolutions, tonight we have a first reading of ordinance 84, 7th series, authorizing the issuance of $3.5 million in general obligation bonds by the Port Authority. And Bill, did you want to comment on that? Our finance director. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, this ordinance is required if we are to move forward as the Port Authority to finance a project for Lakes Country Service Co-op, looking at doing a Level 4 education facility. And this would put the full faith and credit of the city behind that project, but that's how you get your best financing, your lowest interest rates. So it's a process we've done before when we bonded through the Port Authority, but the Port would actually be issuing general obligation bonds, but it's the city's taxing authority that gets put behind that. Now, the plan is not to use tax dollars to fund those bonds. It would be funded through lease payments from Lakes Country Service Co-op, making the Port Authority completely whole. But as far as security behind those bonds, that's where this comes in, and we need to do that by ordinance. So that's what's before you tonight for a first reading.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any questions of Bill? If not, I would like to introduce that. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Bill.
This is for the project in the Armory Building out in the Industrial Park, correct?
Yes. Yes. Item number 2 is the second reading of ordinance 87th series, which pertains to right-of-way regulations. If there are any questions, I would direct them to our city attorney. This has been through committee and been discussed and introduced. If not, roll call, please.
Ginsburg.
Yes.
Kwame.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Arneson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. We also have a second reading of ordinance 81, 7th series, telecommunications facilities regulations. Again, this has been through committee and discussed. It's been introduced at a regular council meeting. If there's questions, we'll direct them to our city attorney. Roll call, please.
Ginsburg.
Yes.
Kwame.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Arneson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. One final second reading this evening is, and that is reading of ordinance 82, the 7th series, amending City Code 6.26, which regulates the number of allowed animals. Again, we've discussed this multiple times at multiple committee and council discussions. If anyone has any questions or comments, roll call, please.
Ginsburg.
Yes.
Kwame.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Arneson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number 5 is a resolution authorizing the city to execute agreements with the state of Minnesota for the Regional Treatment Center. That was recommended by the Committee of the Whole on Wednesday, and I will call on Andrew Bremseth just to recap that for us.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Members covered this in detail on Wednesday, but essentially what we're doing is giving permission to access the $3.5 million that were given to the city in the last legislative session through the economic development portion of the bonding bill. The resolution before you this evening comes from their draft resolution at the Department of Employment and Economic Development and is part of the process that we have to do to be able to get reimbursement from that pot of money. So formality, but an important step in getting the $3.5 million released to us or available to us as we begin moving forward with this project.
Thank you. Andrew, is there someone who would like to offer that resolution?
Offer that.
Thank you.
I'll second, Your Honor.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Justin. Any discussion? Scott?
I'll be voting no, and I just want to point out that the reasoning for that is that any action that we take that is going to move the ball forward, in this case, the wrecking ball forward on the demolition of the RTC, I can't support at this time.
Thank you, Scott. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Hagberg,
Yes.
Tommy,
No.
Rupert,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Ferguson,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number 6 is along the same lines as a resolution approving the plans and specifications and to authorize the advertisement of bids for Phase 2 RTC contingent upon SHPO's final comments. And again, I'll call on Andrew Bremseth just to remind us what the final comments we're waiting on from the State Historical Preservation Office.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Members, the final comments are related to the approved mitigation plan. We've submitted what the plan proposal is from the city's perspective, and ultimately, under statute, SHPO has to approve that. We anticipate that happens in short order, as they indicated that they could expedite that review. And we want to be ready to proceed as soon as we get that review, so we can try to move things forward and salvage this building season as much as possible.
Thank you, Andrew. With that, is there someone who'd like to offer that resolution?
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Tom, thank you.
Second that.
Second, Andrew. Any comments, discussion from the council?
Yes, I'd like to make some comments, please.
Scott, please.
As I've commented on Wednesday, and I'd like to reiterate again here, we ought to be completing the master plan first. We've committed to doing the master plan, and we ought to move ahead with that process and get the master plan finished before we start swinging the wrecking ball on the building up there. I'd like for you to consider the library in town. We've got a beautiful library. It's a terrific asset for our city. We're very proud of it, and it's been a wonderful project to see that completed. The library is an example of adaptive reuse of an old building. You step in there, you see those nice big beams in there. Those are from the old building. But you step in there, it looks like a brand-new place. They've done a wonderful job in the planning and in the execution there of creating a wonderful building from something that could adaptively be reused. And I think that credit goes to the people that were involved in putting that plan together. We didn't tear down something old, and we didn't do it by tearing down first and then building. We had a plan together, put the plan together first, and then moved ahead. We had a good group of people with vision. They understood the value, and they understood and worked hard toward a goal that was planned ahead of time. The future of the RTC is a question of economic development, and we ought to be looking more and more for economic development all the time. In news today, Shopko's closing. There's reason for us to be focused on economic development, and demolition is not the path to economic development. We should not be looking for demolition, we should be looking at development. We should be seeking adaptive reuses. And this is a unique historical asset that draws people from all over the country and from beyond the country. And they come here to see the RTC. They come here looking to get tours, to take pictures, to be here for events that are taking place there. And frankly, as nice as the library is, they're not coming from Illinois to look at the library. They're coming to see the RTC. And these particular buildings, in this particular Phase 2 demolition project, are the buildings where people gathered. The kitchen, the dining room, the auditorium. These are the places where people gathered for events. These are the places that are best suited for events that are going to draw people. They're not necessarily residential. They're not adapted for that necessarily. The potential gain for the city is being ignored. And we ought to complete the master plan first. This group of buildings is no threat to the city. There is no significant risk to the taxpayers to wait for 18 months or 24 months to get the master plan done. There's nothing else in the works right now. There's nothing waiting to move into that space as soon as we get it cleared out. It's just unnecessary to do this at this time. Even American Covenant Senior Housing, with their plans, couldn't possibly start under the best case scenario until late this fall, even if they get their funding this summer. So there's no point in starting with demolition at this time. Now, someone up here is bound to say, we've been working on this for years and we need to stay the course. Well, I say when you're on the wrong course, it's time to change direction, and the sooner the better, and no better than right now. A vote against this resolution doesn't mean that this demolition will never happen. Frankly, it very well could. But it only means let's wait and see. Let's complete the master planning process and see what that brings. So I urge my fellow members of the council to use some common sense and vote no on this resolution.
Thank you, Scott. I would just like to have a couple comments in response to that. And first one being to say that we're on the wrong course. I think that that's not simply 7 members of the City Council. That is the State Historical Preservation Office. We've worked very close with them, and anyone who knows anything about preservation in the state of Minnesota knows that they are out to preserve the buildings that they believe should be preserved. We've worked very diligently as a city. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been something that's happened overnight. We've developed a plan that they have signed off on with their final comments. They will. We've also worked with the Minnesota State Legislature, who I believe is the one that ultimately has the funds to help the city. And we've made what I believe is a compromise that works for this city, that I believe will lead to ultimately the redevelopment of that property. But we have for 12 years gone down a road and then stopped at the last minute and changed direction, the community as a whole, and that's been, and I'll take as much blame as anybody for that as being on the council for 8 of those years. But we've got a plan. We're moving forward, and I think it's critical that as a city, we do what we've worked with the State Historical Preservation Office, the state legislature, and local groups to move forward on this. And I very much appreciate and respect your views on this, but I just think that we as a community, as a whole, need to move forward and continue to minimize the risk to the taxpayers while still maintaining the historic integrity of that campus. So are there any, I think I'm guessing, Lori, did you have something? Yeah.
Anthony has something.
Anthony, you want to? Let's go ahead, Lori, and then we'll just.
Lori Mullen, 2840 Lakewood Drive, Friends of the Kirkbride. And I guess, my comments would go back to why are we looking at Phase 2 demolition when we haven't engaged in the master plan process. February, the city staff and the city planner had a conversation with SHPO. And SHPO had indicated they wanted expanded input. And that has not happened. No, they said that you mentioned that there would be input into the master plan. Well, nowhere does it say that the powerhouse, the kitchen, and the gymnasium are going to be taken down before we engage with the master plan.
But that was, I don't mean to, I just make it clear. SHPO understands that Phase 2, that's their mitigating response to Phase 2 happening, which does include the deconstruction of the cafeteria, the powerhouse, and also the National Park Service, along with the historical architect that we consulted with to work with the National Park Service and the National Registries have all signed off on this thing. So to act like the city is being irresponsible from historical preservation, I just don't think it's fair.
Where are those documents? I guess we haven't seen them. And SHPO, I've talked to SHPO too, but SHPO doesn't give permission to demolish historic buildings. They will look at your mitigation plan and make sure that it's complete as it can be, but SHPO would never say, take down the kitchen and take down the powerhouse.
SHPO has agreed, as well as the National Park Service, which has control over the National Registry, that if we have a phased approach, which includes Phase 1, which we've already completed, and Phase 2, that we will maintain the historical registry of that building, which includes the tax credits necessary for the development of the horseshoe. So
I understand that.
To say that SHPO hasn't been involved, quite honestly, it's not accurate.
Well, they put a minimal. There, I get that.
Respectfully, I just have to say that this council has done the work. We're trying to work to save that horseshoe. We've worked very hard. The city is...
No, and I appreciate that. I'm just thinking that there may be a little bit more that could be saved. The gymnasium, that's very usable, and a portion of the kitchen. And maybe the rest of it will go down, but... And I'm not saying save every inch back there. But I know that the American Covenant, they had I think a couple of the council people had indicated they wanted their vision clear across from east attached to west attached. Well, quite honestly, if the kitchen was peeled back to be equal to what the gymnasium was, it wouldn't block that view.
Sure.
And an architect could make that look really quite fabulous. I'd sent Andrew some pictures of what the gymnasium could look like. That wasn't, exactly to my liking, but it's, one rendition. And there certainly could be several others that could be proposed for that. And I think that saving the gymnasium and part of the kitchen area actually enhances the use up there with the tower, so.
Sure. And thank you,
other
Laura.
groups that could be,
Thank you for your comments, and again, I very respectfully understand where you're coming from on this. I just happen to believe very strongly that we need to continue to move forward, and that that we are maintaining the historical integrity of the horseshoe, which is, if we can develop the horseshoe out of that, I think that the entire community would be benefit by that. So
And
that's.
we'd have a little more gathering space with the auditorium and a little bit of the kitchen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Well, Alex, did you have some comments?
Hello, Alex Cabrera, Ward 1, Precinct 1. I'm really just more interested in what Scott had to say here. I spent 10 years in the Navy, and the plan I'm hearing is ready, fire, aim. If you have a master plan that you've agreed upon, funded, and haven't received, it makes no sense to me to hear that a city is moving forward on actions without the plan being completed. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I'll just make one clarification on that. The master plan was at the suggestion and the agreement of SHPO. Again, the State Historical Preservation Office said that if you go ahead with Phase 2, we think, to, as a mitigating response, to complete a master plan for the remainder of the campus as a whole, including the horseshoe and the grounds. So, again, that's not something that the City Council came up with. The City Council agreed to go along with what SHPO recommended, and that is the State Historical Preservation Office. So, just so everyone's clear, that is something that we are agreeing to go along with SHPO and work with them, as well as local preservationists and the Heritage Preservation Commission. So,
And
just to be clear on who.
And they are not requiring us to delay Phase 2 for the master plan. They're saying continue with Phase 2, and in conjunction with that, we're doing the master plan.
And in fact, they have not suggested that.
Correct. So, I mean,
It's
we're not-
move forward with Phase 2.
We're not going against what the recommendation of SHPO and the National Parks and Trails are doing.
Well, I'm not saying you're going against it, but again, it just makes more common sense, I think, to have a plan, and then you aim, and then you fire to take an action. But as I understand it, the communication that happened between SHIP and the city, which was an opportunity to broaden the input from other participants, when was that received?
Oh, that's part of the master plan.
Yeah, there's some misinformation going on, Your Honor, members, and accusations, and SHPO has...
That's a simple question.
No, I'm referring to Lori's comments. SHPO has asked that they have a seat at the table throughout this master plan, and in the proposal that we put together for SHPO, it shows just that. We have been very inclusive with SHPO. We have been to their office in St. Paul on multiple occasions. They have been in Fergus Falls. They could tell you as well as we could what our plan is, and they will have a seat at the table in relation to the master plan that occurs, where as soon as we get the green light from SHPO and they agree to our mitigation strategy, it's our intention to begin seeking proposals, requests for qualifications on these firms to start the master plan as soon as possible and to complete that as soon as possible. And that's where SHPO has asked for the opportunity to have some expanded involvement, to potentially have somebody serving on the community panel and on the stakeholder groups that are convened around that effort. And we're certainly agreeable to that.
And that's the
and
question I was
encourage that.
asking. Just
Yep.
when was that relayed to the city?
It was relayed to me in an internal phone call that I had with them about a month ago.
About a month ago. To my understanding, that expansion happened March 1st.
Of the
The request for others to provide input.
I believe that's as part of the master planning process, am I correct?
Yeah,
They
I
just
mean-
want to see this, when you get to the point of implementing this master plan, just want to make sure that everyone's involved, and I think as I've always,
Right, and then the final return of that information was sent out on the 4th. That makes, but.
I think we're talking about two different things. I think what you're referring to is Ryan Dietlock, the city planner, we were putting together the draft proposal for our final mitigation, and that is, what is this master plan going to consist of? And at that time, Lois Josephson, who's a member of the HBC, was invited to join us on a call, and she expressed that she, as a member of that committee, would like to have the opportunity to look at this stuff and comment on it. That was provided to them on a Friday, I don't recall the date, and we submitted it on either a Monday or Tuesday late in the day. And we asked for their comments. We agreed to a 3 o'clock deadline. We did not receive anything until after 3 o'clock, so we proceeded to send our proposal to SHPO, and that's what's in front of them now to respond to.
Right.
There'll be plenty of opportunities for the HPC, for other groups, for the general public to participate within the master planning process, which is going to be potentially a 9-month process that has several different touch points related to public involvement.
And that's great, however, actions will be taken prior to the master plan's completion, as I understand.
And that's the intention of the city, as I understand it, and of
I think
SHPO.
I think the point of clarification is that the master plan is post phase 2, not pre phase 2. So I think that's where perhaps there's some confusion.
Okay.
It's post, not pre.
at SHPO's
Yep.
suggestion.
Thank you.
Anyone, we're going to vote, Al, I saw you said, did you have,
Nope, nope.
no?
And then,
you have something?
yeah, I just said.
Anthony?
I think, sorry. Oh, Al, have you got a comment?
I don't know, but
Yeah, I saw you stand up. I
this
just-
government thing is very complicated.
Who knew?
Stood. Therefore, by standing there, it implies something.
Exactly. Al Krameyer from Fergus Falls here. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. As I said, government's very complicated. I'm pretty simple. Being on the Planning Commission, not that I'm speaking for the Planning Commission, I'm speaking on my own behalf as a citizen. Looking up the years to come here in 2020 with Otter Tail Power Plant closing and tax deficits on that. And I think, Andrew, that's going to be close to $400,000. And then we look at other businesses that have closed in 2018, and I don't know what the numbers are on that, but I'm guessing it's probably another $300,000. So, you know, theoretically, I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong, Andrew. You might know better than I.
I don't have that with me today.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't expect you to.
Right.
But I'm just kind of, you know, counting up in my head.
Sure.
You know, I don't know what they're paying. And I guess what I'm more concerned about right now is what we're going to do for business and industry in the city and with RTC. You know, with the opportunities that can be up there. And I guess I have reservations with this other developer, especially when a developer, and not that all developers are bad, but what I am a little bit leery about is a developer that wants to try to source money from anywhere he can get it besides his own pocket. And then when I hear, as I was told earlier, it was senior housing and maybe low-income senior housing. And then it came to at our meeting the other day, along with City Council, the Historic Preservation Committee, and the Planning Commission, that there was a homeless factor that came into play. I guess we were unaware of that, and I think I can say the City Council was unaware of that. And I don't know why that would be, that it comes up at a meeting of that nature. And I don't think that question would have ever been asked unless somebody had heard about it. And I guess I'm very leery with a developer that is not going to tell us everything. I really want to see what we can do with some business and industry. I think if it's awarded to somebody like that is trying to find a free ride, and I will use that term, free ride, because us taxpayers are paying that. Be it city, county, or state, we are paying that.
And in my opinion, we are in dire strait right now. We have to figure something out. And I don't get nervous very often, but I'm nervous now. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Any other comments from the council?
I'd just like to kind of say that I think, you know, in sort of addressing some of the comments that have been made, that, you know, the R2C curb ride is not being ignored by the council. I think there's been many hours spent discussing this, and perhaps, you know, if as many hours had been spent into economic development as talking about, you know, the RTC alone, you know, then maybe we would be in a different place. But I think, you know, we also have to look at the practicality of restoration of certain of the buildings. And, you know, there's some buildings that obviously are more important than other buildings. And I think the horseshoe, as the mayor has kind of, you know, mentioned, is the most critical and most important. And I think if you sometimes, you know, you have to sacrifice something to gain something. And if sacrificing, you know, the cafeteria and the gymnasium, you know, leaves quality buildings standing, then in my mind, that's good mitigation and a good planning. I disagree with Councilmember Kwame that there is a risk to the taxpayer of Fergus Falls. The longer those buildings stand and the longer time goes by, you know, there's less opportunity for, you know, the state to come up with funds. You know, we as kind of council members, we have that responsibility to mitigate risk, and the longer it sits with nothing, then the greater is that risk. Obviously, there is historic value in certain of the buildings, and I think, you know, the tower is one of those. And at the end of the day, you know, we need somebody to step forward. And, you know, it's very easy to sit on the sidelines and criticize council for not doing X, Y, or Z, but we have changed course on numerous occasions. Every time that somebody has come up at the 11th hour with a rescue plan, then we have stopped and we have changed course. And then we've waited 2 or 3 years and we've gone back to the state and asked for an extension. And if you know, I think the original bonding bill had the most extensions of any other bonding bill in the state of Minnesota. So I think, you know, it's unfair to say that council has not entertained other opportunities that have come along. We have. And some of those, well, in fact, most of them obviously have not ended up with anything tangible. We have to ultimately look at what that facility can be, and I think that's part of the post, you know, deconstruction of phase 2 will give us the opportunity to see what can be done. But realistically, I don't see any light industry going up there. You know, the buildings are not practical for industry. They might make administrative type office, and they might make housing. And I think that's about the best that we could actually hope for. And I think what is, you know, needs also to be said is that, you know, as Mr. Kramer made mention that, you know, obviously there's tax deficits coming up in terms of Hoot Lake closing and business closing. It's hard to get somebody to move into some of these buildings. You know, we are working on trying to get people to come and look at buildings, but at the end of the day, you know, we can only show what we can do. And the RTC does have a 15-year tax exemption, so even if somebody moves into any of those facilities, they're not going to be on the tax roll for a long time. And I think the other thing to make people aware of is that I think there's, you know, between state and federal, there's a 40% tax credit for every dollar that you spend on renovating the RTC. So that means, you know, if somebody puts $100 million in there, you know, they get $40 million in tax credits, which goes back to Al's comment about we as taxpayers are paying that. And I think, but the other thing to kind of also ask is that, you know, the people that are looking at the tips of the wings, they can't make it pay with a 40% tax credit. So they're looking at other forms of tax credits to make this building cash flow. And you know, even Ray Wiley was looking at housing tax credits and USDA tax credits. So everybody that's looked at those facilities has looked at every possible tax credit that become available, and they can't make it pay. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what it needs to be. It has to cash flow for a developer. And I think that's why we're struggling to find somebody. What we're doing now brings down the footprint to a more manageable site. If we can get these people to take the wingtips, then that's a piece of it. We need somebody to take the tower, and then maybe then there's an infill opportunity. But I think people shouldn't be mistaken that it takes a lot of money to restore this building, and there's a certain practicality that has to go with that. And at the end of the day, that's what the developer looks at, and that's what he makes his decision on.
Say one thing.
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, go ahead, Al.
It won't take long.
No, you're fine.
And I understand completely, Anthony, what you're saying. I understand that completely. I guess what I'm looking at, or what I went after that meeting that we had, and walking away from that, is I took it as, here comes a developer that's going to put, I don't know if he's going to put any skin in the game or not, but yet then he's going to bring in, if we don't have a homeless population, then it's going to have to be brought in to town. I don't know if that's the case or not.
That's not actually the case, and we can have Michael maybe from the HR. I think that's a separate conversation.
Okay.
That development.
That's
And
not
that,
what's on the
respectfully, I
table.
think we need to stay
Okay.
on task with the.
Sorry about that.
And Your
No,
Honor,
you're fine.
Let me
You're
just
fine,
say,
Al.
we had planned to bring that to the next committee of the whole meeting next week, and
Oh, okay.
and Michael's going to be there to speak to the definition of homeless, which is
Okay.
not what you think it
Okay.
is.
Sure, and because after that meeting we had, there is some misunderstanding about what, those
There's a lot of
housing and finance
Yeah.
tax credits and what that application, and there's certain criteria on there that you can apply for. So anyway, I think we can have that conversation. I think it's a
Because I'm
valid
just
one.
looking at, as far as the liabilities to the taxpayer.
Sure.
It's going to, I think it would create more.
I think that's an
stand.
opportunity.
But that's probably, that's a whole
It's
nother
on the
conversation.
agenda.
But I think that's an opportunity at the next council, at the committee of the whole, we'll invite Michael back to just kind of go through and what those definitions actually mean and what that would mean to the community, just to give the council an opportunity to have that information and to make, make informed decisions.
Yeah.
So, certainly not to, that's, valid discussion, I think we need to have it, but let's just make sure that we do that when Michael's here to present the information, the council has that information.
Okay.
We can have more information on that project at that time, too. Does that sound
Yep.
fair to you, Andrew?
No, that's what the
Staff-
intention was.
Staff can,
All right.
Tom, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just to keep, I'll keep it quick too. I just wanted to, a lot of what Councilmember Hicks said echoes my sentiments on it, but to specifically address the comparison to the library project, which Councilmember Kwame mentioned, I view the library project as an example of a project that was absolutely done the right way. I'm proud to say I was the president of the library board in the earliest phases of that project, and not that I would take credit for it, but I'm just, proud to be a part of, proud to be a part of the project that Aaron helped, get off the ground and push through.
I'm
but-
leaving now, Tom.
Thank you, Al.
But, with all due respect, the big difference between the RTC and the library is that the library enjoyed widespread, diverse public support, which I don't believe that the RTC, using tax dollars to refurbish or restore the RTC, I don't think enjoys that same level of support. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thanks, Tom. Laura, did you have
One last thing.
one last thing?
Wanted to just mention that the 40% historic tax credits from state and federal, those are out there, and if they don't get used in Fergus, they'll get used someplace. So let's not discourage anybody from going after
certainly.
whatever those programs might be. Because like I said, they're there, and they're,
Yep.
and every one of those tax credits too, they say that they return $9.81. So it's money that's coming into our community. And granted, it is, obviously, any tax credits is taxpayers' dollars, but they're out there, and let's bring them into Fergus. So
Absolutely.
it's a good thing.
Thank you, Lori. All right, with
Call for the
that,
question.
yeah, let's have the roll call, please.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, we did.
Tom
Yep.
and Anthony.
That was a while ago, hang on.
That was Tom and Andrew.
Sorry. It was 3 pages ago.
Thanks, Elaine. Whenever.
Sorry. Hagberg.
Yes.
Kwame.
No.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ernestine.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number 7 is a resolution approving agreement with the business development for Fergus Falls. Andrew, did you want to comment on that?
I will, yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Members, before you this evening is a agreement that City Attorney Nicolomo drafted to put in place with the new business development for Fergus Falls, which is going to be the loan review board of all of the city's loan programs related to business and economic development. A few things that I would just note, we're proposing a 5-year term or agreement. And there's a few things that we added in there, including some loan limits related to business subsidy laws. Right now, anything that, anybody that borrows $75,000 requires a business subsidy, so capping the limit without further authorization from the city council. One thing that is different in this agreement than the previous agreement with business development of Fergus Falls is related to this board making recommendations to the city council, with the city council ultimately approving all of the loan applications. I don't envision that the city council would have to discuss these things in any detail, but at least there would be some knowledge and accountability for how these city dollars are being used. I'm not saying that's not the case today, but today the city council does not see these things and doesn't totally understand or know where the dollars are going. So that's really the bread and butter of the agreement. Everything else is pretty similar. I don't know, Rolf, if you have anything to add, but pretty straightforward agreement, and would be looking to get this in place as soon as possible. The current agreement was extended through the end of this month, so we would be in compliance with that timeline if we approve this tonight.
Thank you, Andrew. I know, Anthony, you serve as a liaison. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think the board has started a meeting. I think we've had 2 meetings now. I think the fact that everything is under one kind of umbrella will make things a lot smoother, particularly when it comes to this whole business subsidy, that we don't have 3 different people working on loans, and I think it's in line with kind of making it simpler for entrepreneurs or people in town that want to improve some of their buildings. There's a one-stop shop now, so far it's working good.
Thank you, Anthony. With that, I would entertain a resolution approving this agreement.
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Krista.
I'll second, Your Honor.
Thank you, Justin. Any further questions or comment? Roll call, please.
Hagberg.
Yes.
Kwame.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ernestine.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Tonight, we have claims in the amount of $924,732.96. And if there's any questions, we will direct them to our city finance director. Hearing none, is there a resolution to approve that presentation of claims?
I'll make that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Tom. Roll call, please.
Hagberg.
Yes.
Kwame.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ernestine.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. There are no board, committee, and department reports. There are no reports from staff and administrative officers. Under old and unfinished business, we have a discussion relating to the community task force that we have discussed at our last 2 council meetings. You have a 3-page handout, and I'll just start out going over this, and then I'd like to open up to some discussion if there is some from the council. But just to recap, the priorities, the projects and priorities that were determined at the February 13th, 2019 meeting of the City Council, the retreat that was held. Downtown Riverfront project, streets and infrastructure, the community center that could include in multiple different projects, including aquatic center, daycare, teen center, which is ones that were identified. The comprehensive plan, Lake Alice, housing, and then parks and trails. Those were the projects that were identified. The asterisks on your sheet, I guess we have a copy up on the board too. The downtown riverfront project, we have a bill at the state legislature right now. We've initiated that project. So that is why that one is not going to be considered in this project. We didn't feel the comprehensive plan was more of a, not something that obviously that would go on be part of a sales tax discussion for the community, or even a project that's more of an internal project. So that one, and then as well as the housing, which we have recently completed a housing task force, and at the last council meeting, we discussed utilizing that task force along with some of the task force that have worked on projects, including the dairy, to use those to implement both the housing and the downtown riverfront master plan study that we had. So that is why those 3 projects were not included in the formulation of the task force. Just a couple points to the intention of the task force would be to continue the work that was started by the council at their retreat, and to broaden the participation. We opened up to the public, and we had overwhelming response from the general public, so much so that we are not able to include all of the citizens that reached out to us in the initial task force. So I will make a suggestion, and we can have a discussion on forming a citizen participation component that would include council members holding, we talked about this, I think, holding town hall style meetings in each of the ward, give each council member an opportunity to work with those citizens who have expressed interest in being a part of the process. Really, I think there's a role for everyone to play, and it's a great problem to have that we have more people that, of course, we can't have a 30-member task force. That's just not going to work, right? So we really appreciate everyone's willingness and eagerness to be a part, and I think there will be a role for everyone to play. So what we did is we put together, we brainstormed along with, and thank you to those council members who gave the input to Lynn. So we compiled all that along with some internal discussions, and said of those projects that we identified at the retreat, who are the project champions and who would be affected by that, so that we could lay the groundwork for the components to be included in a larger project that would be then put before the public in the sales tax. Just, I think, Andrew, you've all seen a timeline. We're under an aggressive timeline if we're going to consider this, so I think we need to get it started. But in order to be on the November general election ballot in 2020, the project needs to be identified by August 1st of 2020 at the latest. That gives us some time, but it doesn't give us a lot of time. It's very possible that this is not a project that's going to move forward in that time frame, and there's always a possibility that we could look at 2022. So I guess the council members then would be asked to host the meetings with those citizens and residents in their ward, along with those who volunteered to be a part, and to get the most. And we do that dual track. While the task force is working on compiling that list, we also then hold those meetings and get the public engagement. So we're going on this aggressive timeline, going on a dual track. So with all that being said, the proposed task force would consist of, and a lot of these are placeholders, and I'll say that because I don't want to tell school, for example, who's the best person for them to put on this. We took this and just general categories. The YMCA, you guys have a copy of this, right?
No.
It's not on the board, but it'd be the YMCA, which include, I envision, 2 members. The school having 2 members, including the administrator, the new administrator, and representative from the student body. Someone from the Aquatic Center Task Force, 1 member from Greater Fergus Falls, 1 member from the Downtown Riverfront Council, representation from West Central Initiative, the United Way, Visit Fergus Falls, a member of the Parks and Trails community, Lake Alice, representative of the Lake Alice neighborhood group, city staff, and council representation. So with that, if we can have discussion on that, and then if people, again, the last 2 weeks we've gotten input from each of you, or you've had the opportunity to solicit names of people and or groups. If there's anyone that's should be on this list that's not, I'd be open to discussing that. If the council has thoughts on the process outlined, or we can approve the formation of this task force while we've jointly formed the Citizens Advisory Task Force that will work with the council members. Scott?
2 comments.
Sure.
On the first page, the definition or the indications that the community center would include components of aquatic center, daycare, and teen center. I think we also talked about the senior center. Wasn't that also a part of the conversation? Just wanted to note that for the record.
I think you're right, Scott. I don't remember exactly, but I know that was brought up at one point. In fact, I'll say this, that's one entity that I left off.
Okay.
So can I add that to this list?
It's fine with me.
Scott?
My second comment then would be that the impetus for this whole deal really was the aquatic center and the aquatic committee and the work that they had done. And as such, I think the task force composition ought to have at least 2 members from that committee.
Sure.
If not more. I mean, that's what got the ball rolling on this, and now it's rolling into involve a lot of other things, but I think they need a greater representation.
Let me make a comment to that, and I agree. I think that Justin Arneson has served on that task force, and so I believe that all 8 council members have a role to play in the convening of the community meetings. But being that Justin has been the liaison to the Aquatic Center, I envision Justin to be the council representative, in addition to a representative from the Aquatic Center of their choosing. Any other thoughts? Anthony?
The only other area that I would say, to cover would be something based more upon the arts. I mean, the arts are kind of a big kind of area for us.
Sure.
Between Centre for the Arts and Lake Region Art Council and Springboard for the Arts, maybe we should have somebody on there as one member.
I'm always.
I mean, if you've got 2 to 3 members of the YMCA, so maybe we trim that down to 2 and throw somebody else on the arts.
Got it. Done deal. I like it.
They're a downtown.
I got overruled on that one this morning, so I agree with you, Anthony.
Okay, great, thank you.
But I won't say who overruled me. No, I know. Okay, so with that, would we have a motion to approve this as well as simultaneously put together the group that will go out and work with the council members?
I would say do that and come back with some names on the doors.
Okay.
I'll
Are you
second
looking to
that.
include any, what you might call at-large members from the community in this group, or is the community membership only going to be on the town hall stuff and not necessarily a part of this group?
I think, well, what I would envision is that group would have the opportunity then to come back, have 1 or 2 people from that group, bring that information and synthesized back to this group, to keep this group manageable, but then also bring in any of those other.
And this is 14 to 15 people.
It's getting to be kind of.
No, I understand.
Large already,
I've got
so-
at least 2 people that had contacted me wanting to be a part of
Sure.
it, and I said, we're going to be talking about that tonight, so I needed an answer.
Sure. And there will be a role for everyone. And I also would think that as we go through this, if we're going to be successful, we're going to have to be flexible and understand it's going to be a fluid process. And more importantly than anything, be willing to work together, right?
I think the biggest thing, following up on Scott's comment, is that when we have those public hearings, we have to listen. And we have to take note of what people say, as opposed to coming in with preconceived ideas.
All right.
With that, I'll make the motion to accept this with the...
You already did.
Oh, you did.
I second it.
Got it. Any other further comments or discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Which one?
That motion carries. There is no new business. I just wanted to bring one item up for discussion and give anyone else the opportunity. It's been brought up a couple times this meeting so far. The news, I've heard it secondhand, but I'm assuming that we all heard the news that Shopko will be closing in June. And, not to put too much of a spin on it, but I do see it as an opportunity. This community was not viable because we had a Shopko. That was a viable entity anchoring a portion of our downtown. As we look to invest in our downtown, we have an opportunity there. I'm just going to read a statement that I get, because I'll tell you where I'm coming from. This is going to be in the paper tomorrow, but I'll just tell you where I'm coming from, so you guys are aware, and if you guys have any comments to make, because we have to get after this, right? If anyone's going to right this ship, it's going to be us right here. So we've already reached out to Shopko. First and foremost, we heard, as soon as we heard the news this morning, we've reached out to their corporate headquarters. And I believe personally that the city needs to do everything we can to acquire that property and have local control over that site. It's a viable retail location, and as we look at the investments we're planning on making downtown, it's going to be, and we look at the investments we're making also to the future of Fergus Falls, this is another example of a national decision affecting us locally, and we have to start taking steps that will allow us to have local controls over these types of decisions. We're going to work with Greater Fergus Falls. We're going to work with the Downtown Riverfront Council. We'll work with the Port Authority. We'll work, obviously, with the city staff. We'll work with anyone else who wants to work with us. But we need to take the lead. We'll work with anyone who believes in a strong future for our city, and to specifically look at what we can do to locally make that a stable and prosperous anchor to our downtown. So I'm ready to get after it, get control of that site, and take control of our own destiny. That's where I'm coming from, and if anyone has anything else. And Tom, I heard you made a nice post on Facebook, but I did not read it, so I'm going to let you give your thoughts.
Yeah, I echo what you said about an opportunity. I mean, we have two ways that we can react to this. We can feel sorry for ourselves, and we can cry about it, and we can go on Facebook and post nasty comments about who didn't do something or who did do something. Or we can take that energy and we can turn that in a positive direction and say, well, life has given us some lemons, let's make some lemonade. I mean, I totally agree with you. It's a great retail spot, so an opportunity is open. But what it's going to take is it's going to take everybody pulling in the same direction and working together and thinking outside the box, coming up with new ideas. But I'm not going to sit around and mope about it. I'm going to start working with various groups to determine what the next step is. So, and I would just ask that everyone keep an open mind and do the same.
Thanks, Tom. Anyone else?
I would just say that from an economic development point of view, we reached out to Shopko on several occasions post the Target and Herberger's decisions. So, the city has been in contact with that group on more than one occasion, not just today.
Absolutely.
So this isn't something that we sat by. I mean, and even as recent as when they, made the decision to move the pharmacy out. So, the city has had contact with them, and as the mayor said, this was a national decision that affected us locally.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Their national headquarters are in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We've been in contact with them multiple times, and again today. So we're not gonna wait around. I think it's an opportunity, and I hope that the city council will agree with that. And when the opportunity arises, we need to be aggressive, take destiny in our own hands. That will be adjourned.
I was going to say one thing.
Sure.
If you could take the knockback. I kind of just want to say something about snow clearing. I know this winter we've seen a tremendous amount of snow. We've seen a tremendous amount of cold, or felt a tremendous amount of cold. But I know people have got frustrated that perhaps the roads haven't been cleared fast enough, quick enough, timely enough. But the city crews have worked extremely hard this year, above and beyond a normal winter. And as much as kind of residents get frustrated, these guys are up early in the morning. They've worked abnormal hours this winter, and they've worked long hours. And for residents to be frustrated or complain about the crews is a little bit unfair. When we've had 6+ feet of snow. I'm fed up of clearing snow as much as the rest of you, but these crews, literally they've done it they've been safe, and, it's frustrating for them when cars are parked on streets and they have to go whip around them. It slows the process down tremendously. And so, if you want less frustration with clearing snow and you want it done faster, then park your car appropriately. Get it off the street, and be grateful that these guys get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go out there and clear streets for you, because they've done a good job this winter. So, Guy, pass that message on to your crews. And even equally, I would add, the other day when it snowed on Sunday, one of the guys stopped and dug out a car that had got stuck. And I felt obligated to stop and help him because he was doing it. So, but these
You were the
guys
one stuck, weren't you?
so I mean, these guys, they don't just clear snow. They dig people out too. So,
Well said.
Thanks. Real quickly, I want to piggyback on that. I agree, and thank you for those comments. We're very proud of the work they do, and they do a darn good job. With that being said, you probably all have noticed over the last week that there's been an influx of potholes as a result of the freeze thaw, and just to address that, we're going to be filling those as diligently as we possibly can, but we can't fill them while there's moisture in them. So we need some sunny days, we need to dry these things out, and then we're going to be out there doing our best to fill those. I envision that we'll see even more over the next couple days and weeks, and just bear with us. It's going to be a tough spring for a lot of us here in Minnesota. So we're on it, and as soon as we can, we're going to be filling them.
All right. With that, I'll declare that there shall be no more snow this season.